Hi, students. So today I wanted to talk more about the question that I asked you, right? The question that I asked you earlier this week. And that's this one: what makes a good parent? And for this lesson, you can practice writing by, if you want to type things out on your phone, or if you want to try practice writing by hand, that works too. But you can write along with me while I do this video. And I'm going to be writing out some of the things that I think, okay? So we're gonna talk about what makes a good parent. So when we talk about our opinions, right, in English, opinion is when we think something that is important or good for us, but isn't something that everybody agrees on. So, for example, what makes a good parent? Nobody really can agree that there is one way to be a good parent. And so in English, when we talk about our opinion, we usually say, I think, right? I think you should, that's another one, is you should, or I should. So you can use any kind of pronoun, right? You should, I should, they should. And the word should is kind of weird because it's kind of like saying the word do, right? You do this, I do this, they do this. But instead of saying do, we say should when it's something that we think needs to happen. So it's kind of a polite way of saying, instead of saying I need you to do this, or people should, or people need to do this, you say, oh, you should be nicer. You should be more patient, right? So that's another way to talk about your opinion, something that you think other people should be doing or something you think you should do as a parent. So for example, so you could say, I think, what makes a good parent? And you can use this for any question. If somebody's asking for your opinion, which usually is when they say, what makes a good parent? All of these questions are used to say, well, what do you think, right? So if you say, I think, or if you use, you should, I should, they should, it's helping to let people know your opinion, what's going on in your head. So, for example, so our question, what makes a good parent, right? You could say, well, I think a good parent is patient, right? I think a good parent is somebody that doesn't get angry very quickly and takes the time to listen to their kids. That's something. Now, that's something I think. You may not think the same thing. So try and think of the words that you know in English that describe, people, right? Because parents are people. So people can be mean, they can be nice, they can be kind, they can be patient, they can be strict, right? They can be, I don't know if you know what strict means. So you could say, I think a good parent is strict. And strict just means somebody who always has their kids follow the rules. And if they break a rule, there's a consequence. And consequence just means that, I'm sure you guys have heard this word before, but consequence just means something that happens because another thing happens. So if you drop a glass cup on the ground, it breaks. So the consequence of dropping a glass cup is the glass breaking. And the word consequence, usually when people hear it, they think of like bad things, like consequence is getting in trouble. But really, consequence just means an action happens and it means that something else happens. So a strict parent is somebody that when their kid does something wrong, their kid has to pay the consequence. So if they decide to not behave in school, to act up is another thing that we say in English, to act up, then the consequence is they have to get in trouble at school. They don't make their kid, you know, they don't say, oh, it wasn't my kid's fault, that kind of thing. So you can think of when you're talking about like trying to express yourself, you use, you know, adjectives, which are words that describe, but also you can use verbs. So I think a good parent protects their children. So that's something else, right, that you could say. I think a good parent protects their children. You know, so those are some of the ways. A way to talk about it is by saying, I think, and then saying what it is that you think. I think a good parent is strict. I think a good parent is kind. Right here, let me change the font so it's a little bit easier to see. Sometimes the way things are printed in English, they don't look, you know, how we write them. This should be easier to read. So just try writing that on your own. So I think, and it's really easy. All you have to do is, I think a good parent is, and then think of a describing word. So the describing word is you know, describing words can be like, I think, you know, yellow, red colors, how something looks, are describing words. But since we're talking about how people act, we talk about qualities. And qualities are things that are not, that you don't really see with your eyes, but it's how people act. So I think a good parent is, I'm trying to think of something my parents did, is I think a good parent is understanding. So understanding, now that's interesting. I used a verb, right? Understand. And then I made it a progressive by putting an ing. So when we say this, I think a good parent is understanding. Or I think a good parent is caring. Oh, I spelled that wrong. Is caring, right? So we know that care is spelled C-A-R-E, right? Care, to look after. But if we want to make it a progressive verb, we get rid of the E and put ing. So I think a good parent is caring. So you can use a verb, right? I think a good parent is caring, right? It means that, you know, they're always looking after their kid. They're always trying to think of how to help their kid. So that's another way to talk about, you know, your opinion. I think this. And to answer the question, I think a good parent does this. I think a good parent is caring. I think a good parent is patient. I think a good parent, I think a good parent keeps their kids safe. So again, I used just a regular verb, not a progressive verb, right? A continuous verb. I just said keep, and I put an S at the end. I think a good parent keeps their kids safe. So you can use just a simple tense verb, right? So I'm trying to think of one that would work. So I think a good parent keeps. I think a good parent protects. And we could use, let me think. I think a good parent, I think a good parent, I'll write one that you could probably disagree with. But I've heard other parents say this. So I think a good parent does not let their children go to sleepovers. So this is one that I've heard, and this is one that my parents did to me, is I was not allowed to have sleepovers because they didn't want me to be in another person's house overnight where they couldn't watch me. So I think a good parent does not let their children go to sleepovers. Now you may be thinking, I disagree. I do not agree. I think that good parents do let their, kids go to sleepovers. I think sleepovers are good for children. That could be something that you think. So that's some of the ways. Using by saying I think, right? I think is telling people your opinion, right? When they ask you for it. Or, if somebody's wanting advice, you could say I think. Or you could say the word should, right? You should, I should. So if somebody says, if somebody asked you, how can I be a better parent? So just say like your friend or your sister has a kid and they ask you, so how can I be a better parent? Even if you don't have kids, sometimes people ask you, how can I be a better parent? So you can say, oh, you should be gentle with them. You should be gentle with them. Or you should be gentle with your children. That's also another way to say it. You should be gentle with your children. That could mean like gentle, like you don't like throw them around and stuff, or you should be gentle in how you like talk to them, right? So in English, being gentle can mean like physically like touching things softly and being like gentle, not throwing things around, right? But gentle can also mean, oh, they're a gentle person. It means that they're usually very kind and very quiet. So that's another, way you can talk about it. You could say, parents, another way you could say this is parents should. So what's really nice about saying the word should is you just have to put, I think it's just any kind of noun, really. You could say, you could use a pronoun. I should. We should, right? But you could also say, like I said, parents should. Parents should listen to their children, right? So you could say parents should listen to their children. You could say adults should not swear in front of children. This is one that I hear a lot. People are like, you shouldn't swear in front of your children. You should not say bad words. So you'll see that I used should not, right? Because Maybe you think that adults should say bad words in front of children. It's your opinion. You can think whatever you want. So adults should not. You could also say, oh, I put that in the wrong spot. Adults should not can also be shouldn't, right? You could say shouldn't, shouldn't. Should is yes, shouldn't is no. So adults shouldn't swear in front of their children, or adults should not swear in front of their children, right? So you can say that a couple different ways. And I'm trying to think of something else you could say. So a lot of times in English, when someone asks you a question for your opinion, you can say, I think, right? Or you can say, oh, you should, they should, right? And you can say this with anything. So I'm asking you about, what makes a good parent, but I could ask this about anything. What makes a good leader? What makes a good cook? What makes a good person? What makes somebody a good sister or brother? So you can ask anything. And the way to answer these questions, to tell someone about your opinion, you say, I think, right? I think this. So I think, and you usually put in a part of what the question is, right? So it says, what makes a good parent? Sometimes in English, we have words that are a little bit different, but mean kind of the same thing. So for example, I'm going to ask another question that almost means the same thing as this first question. What makes an effective parent, right? So instead of saying good, right, I said effective. What makes an effective parent? And effective just means like what makes somebody that gets the job done and does what needs to be done, right? So that's what we use, like effective. So you could say it's a quality, right? It's a way that describes, like good does good food, um, good friends. Effective is another describer. It describes somebody or something, right? Effective parent, effective leader, effective supervisor. So those are some of the things that you can do. So, when you're writing, you can practice on your phone, and don't worry too much about spelling, just because what I want you to focus on is not that you're necessarily spelling the words right now, but that you are feeling like you're expressing yourself. So if there's a word that you know, but you don't know how to spell it, just spell it the best that you can. And I want you to get comfortable with just using the words. So if you really like the describing word, or you could even think about this, and then something you could do is, write it or say it in your native language, right? So you could say, answer the question, what makes a good parent, in the language that you speak, and you could answer. Now, go back over that sentence and see if you can translate it yourself. And if you know good describing words. So, the other thing that is kind of helpful that I use in English a lot is a dictionary. And there's dictionaries online, right? So there's a place called dictionary.com. There's lots of dictionary websites out there on the internet that you can just look up a word and it will say what it means. Oh, sorry. But yeah, so some of the ways you can talk about your opinion is you say, I think a good parent does this, or I think a good parent does not do this, right? Because you're talking about the actions that they do. Now, you can also talk about, I think a good parent, and you describe them. I think a good parent is kind. I think a good parent is, a good parent listens, right? So these are like verbs, they're action words that you can use to talk about the actions of good parents, right? So you can use I think, you could use you should, I think you should, because you're talking about your opinion. So that's some of the ways that you can write it. And I'm just going to try and think of some more examples. So what makes a good parent? A good parent, I'll just say ones that don't necessarily, that's not my opinion, but I'm just putting them out there to show you that you can have any idea of what makes a good parent. You can think anything. So I think good parents make their children do all the dishes. Boom, there. I think a good parent makes all their children do the dishes, right? So you can disagree with this. So you can say, oh, I think good parents let their children play all day. Or I think good parents give their children anything they want. So those are some things that people can think, right? I think a good parent, I think good parents let their children play all day long. I think good parents give their children anything they want. And some people are like, I think a good parents make their children do all the dishes. I think a good parent has their kids do the grocery shopping. Everybody has a different opinion. So just try practicing how to write what you think, right? And you can use the words I think, or you can use you should, or I should, or just saying, a person and then should. Parents should. I should. They should, right? We should. So you would use they, if you're not a parent, because you're referring to a group of people that you're not a part of. Or you could use we if you're talking about I'm a parent, and so we are a group of people. We're parents. We are parents. Or you could say, you, which doesn't mean necessarily you're talking to somebody specific, like one person. It's just somebody that's not you, right? That's not yourself. So you should do this. I should. You can use I should if you're a parent. So that's another thing you can do. Now, if you wanted to write something that made it sound like there is only one way to do it, you could say you need to, or I'm trying to think, a good parent does this, right? A good parent does, or a good parent makes their children go to school. Or you need to discipline your children. That's another thought that people have. Now, when you use this kind of sentence, when you use these words together, you need, or if you answer the question by saying, a good parent does this, a good parent makes their children go to school, instead of sounding like an opinion in English, you're making it sound like that is the only way. And for questions like this, it's kind of hard because, you know, being a good parent is different everywhere and everybody has their own opinions, right? Um, but there are some things that you think are, it doesn't matter what you think, it doesn't matter where you're from, there's something that you always need to do. So for example, in the United States, it doesn't matter what your culture is, right? But a good parent, a good parent does not hit their children. Now, not saying this doesn't happen in the US, this happens in America all the time. I got spanked as a kid, where they like hit me on the bum. And some people don't consider that hitting kids, but some people do. And sometimes people get their kids taken away from them because they hit them. So in the United States, and lots of other countries too, lots of other countries have laws that protect children from being physically hit, from being hurt. But so if you want to say something that you think it doesn't matter, that isn't necessarily your opinion, but something that you think should be, that every parent should do, you want to say, you know, you need to do this. You need to discipline your children, right? Or a good parent does not hit their children. You could also say doesn't, right? That's just does and not put together. A good parent doesn't hit their children. So these are some of the ways that you could put it together. And I'm going to send you a worksheet where you can kind of test out writing things. And if you want, we can go over them and correct them if they're wrong. But what I want to kind of help you to do is talk about it, whether it's to somebody you live with, or if you see each other at work, be like, hey, what do you think makes a good parent? And you can talk about it with each other. So a good parent, you know, whatever you think. So remember that, you know, you can use the words I think, or they should, we should, parents should, if you're giving your opinion. But if you're saying something that you want people to know is what you think, but also is something that you think should be true and right for everybody, is you need, or a good parent. It's saying that this is almost like a fact and not an opinion. A fact is something that's true everywhere, right? So a fact is if you drop something, it falls, right? But that's, I guess, that's a fact on Earth. If you drop something on Earth, because if you drop something in space, it floats around. But if you drop something on Earth, it falls down. So that's it for the lesson for today. And I'll send you a worksheet to do to kind of fill out and to work on. If you want to try handwriting, you can just write it out that way if that's easier for you, and practice that way if that's what works best with you. So that's it for today.